Howdy folks, and welcome to another Jack's Arizona Adventures. This video is going to be a little bit different. As you can tell, it's pitch black dark. We're on the riverbanks of the San Pedro River. And it's October, and we're going to tell you a ghost story. One of many ghost stories we have here in Arizona. This is about the ghost of the Weeping Woman of San Pedro River, a ghostly figure that wanders the area here looking for her lost children. In the late 1800s, near the banks of the San Pedro River, there lived a young woman named Maria. Her modest home stood isolated, surrounded by the jagged peaks and dry expanse of the desert. The only thing that seemed to breathe life into her days was the sound of the river's gentle, steady flow. But beneath that calm exterior, the waters held secrets, and Maria's life was one of quiet despair. Her husband, Jake, a miner, spent weeks, sometimes months, deep in the mountains, digging for silver. With each passing day, Maria's loneliness grew, as did her resentment. The nights were the worst, the empty bed, a stark reminder of life she had lost. Her two young children, bright-eyed and innocent, were her only company, but they could not fill the void Jake's absence left behind. At night, the desert came alive with whispers, the winds howling through the jagged cliffs, the rustle of dry leaves scraping against the weathered adobe walls. Maria often stood by the window, gazing at the endless expanse of sand, waiting for a figure that never appeared. The nights were longer now, colder. Each gust of wind sounded like a faint cry, distant but persistent, pulling at her heart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows stretched across the land, Maria noticed something unusual. The river, which had always been a silent companion, seemed to move differently. Its current stronger, its waters darker. A chill settled in the air, and as she stood at its edge, she swore she saw something just beneath the surface, a fleeting shadow like a hand reaching up from the depths. She blinked, but it was gone. At first, they were faint, barely audible over the wind. But as the nights grew colder, the whispers became clearer, soft voices calling her name. Maria, they hissed, beckoning her to the river's edge. She told herself it was her imagination, the loneliness playing tricks on her mind. But the voices persisted, growing louder each night. And then came the cries. They started as distant wails, carried by the wind, but soon they were unmistakable, the mournful cries of a woman drifting through the night air. The sound was heart-wrenching, a mother's grief echoing through the canyons. Maria tried to shut it out, covering her ears, but the cries seeped into her very soul. The children didn't seem to hear them, but to Maria, they were inescapable. The river had taken on a new life. a force that seemed to be pulling her towards it. Maria's thoughts became darker. Her patience with her children thinned. Their laughter grated on her nerves, and their constant demands for attention felt like chains binding her to a life she no longer wanted. The whispers grew louder, the cries more desperate, and deep inside, something within her began to crack. As the days bled into one another, Maria's obsession with the river became all-consuming. The whispers had grown louder, clearer, calling her by name, urging her to come closer. The children, once her joy, now seemed like strangers, their faces blurred in her mind. The river was all she could think about, its cold, dark waters, the secrets it held beneath its surface. One evening, as the crimson sun disappeared behind the mountains, the cries returned, louder, closer than ever before. This time, they were unmistakable. It wasn't just the cries of a woman. It was the cries of her children. Maria's heart raced, fear and confusion swirling inside her. The sound of her children calling out for her, lost and desperate, pierced the ear. Yet both of them lay asleep in their beds. She stumbled towards the river, her mind clouded, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The sound of their voices, pleading, weeping, grew louder with each step. The river seemed alive now, its waters churning violently, crashing against the banks like a living thing, hungry and angry.
Maria!
The voices screamed, louder than ever. Tears streamed down her face as she reached the water's edge, the moon casting an eerie glow over the river's turbulent surface. In the dark, she saw them, two small figures standing in the water, just out of reach. Their faces were familiar, but twisted with fear and sorrow. Her children, drowning. She screamed their names and rushed into the water, her feet sinking into the cold, silty mud as the river tugged at her, pulling her deeper. The water was up to her waist when she realized her children weren't there. It had been a cruel trick, a nightmare brought to life by the river's malevolent force. Panic set in, but it was too late. The river surged, its icy grip wrapping around her, dragging her under. Maria struggled, but the more she fought, the stronger the current became, pulling her down into the depths, silencing her cries. The last sound she heard was the wail of the weeping woman, the river's eternal victim, echoing through the canyons as the water closed over her head. The days passed, and Maria was never seen again. Her children were found alone, their innocent faces full of confusion as they waited for a mother who would never return. The townspeople searched the riverbanks, calling her name, but Maria was gone, swallowed by the cold, unforgiving waters of the San Pedro. Whispers spread through the nearby towns of Mammoth and Oracle. Some said they had seen her wandering along the riverbank at dusk, her dress soaked and clinging to her frail body, her long black hair flowing behind her like the river itself. Others claimed to hear her cries, heart-wrenching wails that echoed through the canyons, carried by the desert wind. Her voice was full of sorrow, of loss, and of anger. A mother's endless grief, forever tied to the water that had claimed her. The legend of the weeping woman was born. Now, on nights when the moon is full and the air is still, the locals say you could still hear Maria's cries. She roams the banks of the San Pedro River, calling out for her lost children. Her voice, a mournful wail that sends chills down the spine of anyone who dares to listen. Some have claimed to see her face, pale and ghostly, her eyes hollow, her cheeks stained with tears, as she searches for her children, forever lost to the river's depths. They say if you wander too close to the river at night, you might hear her whisper your name, calling you closer, just as she was called. And if you follow the sound, you may find yourself face to face with the weeping woman, her cold hands reaching out, her sorrowful eyes locked on yours, pulling you into the depths of the river, where you will share her eternal fate. For those who live near the river, one thing is certain. The San Pedro has never been the same since Maria vanished. The waters carry her grief, her sorrow, and her rage, and on dark, quiet nights, her spirit lingers, a ghostly figure bound to the river, weeping for all eternity. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
That had some heartfelt to it, didn't it?
Yeah.
Woo! Well, we made a weekend out of it after all, didn't we?
Yep.
Is it getting scary yet?
Yeah, but I keep hearing something back there.
It could be a cow.
Yeah.
She blames everyone who comes to the river for her loss. Well, folks, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and our first Arizona ghost story. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed the story. There's a lot of ghost stories here in Arizona, as you can imagine. This is one of many. And did you hear that?
Yeah, I did.
What was that? Okay, we need to pack up now. We need to go.